Was it scary to leave Riot?
That definitely comes from Riot's attitude of when they develop games.
Seekers of Skyveil.
Our aspirational goals at that point would be like a genre-defining game.
What are the cool things that you brought from Riot?
In production of characters, what we're going to do is what can we do to make the game the best it can be? As an artist, it is hard to say. It's not art.
That's the most selfless statement.
If you think of it as a game developer, not as an artist, your whole decision-making process changes.
We should definitely quote that.
We have a pretty nice substance pipeline. With Unreal, we can do some really cool stuff like,
how did you come up with the style?
okay, let's make Extraction Diablo. That's not for us, and it's not in our heart.
A lot of creativity flow, and it's endless.
Maybe in the future. It's a great idea.
How do you define that this approach is better? How would you know what sells? Is that affecting the art? I have a lot of questions.
I have answers.
Hi everyone, my name is Ninel Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios and I'm your host at Devoted SpeakEasy. Today we have an amazing guest, Billy Ahlswede. Billy, hi.
Hi, nice to see you guys.
Excited to have you, learn from you today. I mean, if you guys don't know Billy, he contributed his wisdom, his skills, his awesomeness to games like League of Legends, Valorant, NBA, Dark Kingdom. But today we're going to have a main emphasis and focus on one of the coolest games that I've been playing around with, which is Seekers of the Skyveil. Billy, I have a lot of questions.
I have answers.
Was it scary to leave Riot after 6-7 years that you were there and jump into a startup? Even though it seems like a bunch of friends of yours went there, but how was the experience coming to Elodie after Riot?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was scary since this is the third startup I've been a part of. This will be the first startup that I will ship a game with, which is pretty awesome.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's not always, startups aren't always the most glamorous. But no, it wasn't actually too hard to switch from Valorant. My experience in Valorant was a little bit ups and downs, and it was really fun initially working on Valorant because there was a lot of management challenges. But I found as time went on, I wasn't necessarily the best person for that because my genre isn't necessarily shooters. And, the more time went on, I found myself as the game solidified, I wasn't actually playing the playtest as much, and I wasn't as much interested in the game. And it starts making you think about, you're watching other people like Chris Galat, one of our character artists, who shows up for design playtests. He's a pro Counter-Strike player. He's doing everything he could possibly do to make the game better. And as a developer, after a while, you have to realize that the game you're working on may not be the game you love. So it was a pretty easy decision then to move on from that and see, there's other people out there waiting for that position. To fill it with someone that isn't necessarily the best person for that game, I think is pretty important. It's hard to be introspective sometimes, but if you can look, the more you make games, the time goes on, you have the ability to choose what you want to work on. And there's other people that are much better suited for that role. So for me, it was really about starting fresh and and doing my best work.
Fun. Well, also 32 million that Elodie raised in the process would probably feel it a little safer than jumping into a basement with the friends and trying to build something from scratch. So
yeah, definitely some more stability.
A little bit. And it sounds like you guys are fully remote, right? So it makes it easier to join a team and scale. Fun. Seekers of Skyveil. I watched a bunch of videos of players loving it. How's it been? What's the first impressions? Can you share a little bit more? What are you learning from the community? What are the things that you thought were going to be fun end up not being as fun? Tell me a little more.
Oh, we've been evolving the game for quite some time. It's a really difficult process in a way where when you start dealing with players, you start actually having them play the game. Just art wise, there's things that they like, and then you change stuff over time. Like, for instance, we're just going through some lighting changes now, and then you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I liked the lighting before," or "I like the new lighting," and you have to weigh that out in between, like, well, how much are players saying this? How important is it to us? And it's a blessing to be able to develop games with a community, because you can get instant feedback when you have playtests. You can look through it. You can watch streamer videos of people having a lot of fun. And initially, obviously, Seekers didn't start out as an extraction game. It started out as a RPG. And at some point, we pivoted when we realized, wow, we can't make a lighthearted Diablo. And is anyone really looking for this game at all? So once we had pivoted to the extraction gameplay of League of Legends meets Dark and Darker, I mean, our aspirational goals at that point were to be like a genre-defining game. And to say that now is actually pretty difficult, because how many new genres are there really in games, and how often do they come about? So it's difficult, definitely, to work when people are watching you constantly. So
I would call it more of escape from Tarkov. And I feel like there's a lot of escape from Tarkov meets League, meets some of other stuff. So there's like a really good blend of a lot of things. Like, how did you make it work in one game? And also, how did you come up with an idea of like, oh, how would it look like if we add an extraction element to it?
A lot of trial and error. People were playing Tarkov at the time, or Dark and Darker was getting really popular. And the idea was just like, wow, what if this was, a lot of us have experience making League, and a lot of the team came from League of Legends. So what if we took that style of play that people love, that top-down style of play, and the champions, or Seekers in our cases, based gameplay, and add that to the frustrating element that is an extraction gameplay. I can't tell you how many times we're playtesting, and you're like, I just got a purple weapon. I got to get out. And you can't find the extractor. I can't get to the extractor. And it's a frustrating game. And I think that's what makes great games. So that it's not all roses, right?
I was looking at some feedback of especially like people who are coming in as new players. And I think there's like this caveat where you can load into the game, jump into a chest, get all the stuff out of the chest, and extract yourself. And then the rest of the players are left against the whole gang on the other side. And they're like, what's going on? But it seems like it's happening less and less the more you progress in the game. Is that something that you guys are planning to address, or it's something you're having fun with?
It is definitely something we adjust all of the time. If extraction's too easy, the game isn't fun, right? You hop in, get gear, you can get gear again, and there's no challenge to it. So we try to like bring players together so that their events are one of the things we recently added, where there'd be a meteor that drops down in a location, and everyone sees that message and everyone's going for it. So everyone's going to try to like get that loot from that. So we're bringing players together to actually have that encounter. Otherwise, people tend to avoid each other. Or it's a lot about being sneaky, and it's a lot about like who is the best on the map. There's just a lot of elements that extraction brings together, and that style of play that you don't typically get from other games. And you're always scared someone is around the corner, or you can hear other people just off the map, and you're either like, well, let's go get them, or let's get out of here.
Right. I've seen people complaining that, or like being sad. Complain is a wrong word here, but being sad, like you can get to a chest, and while you're figuring out what's going on, somebody who's next to the chest can get all the stuff there. And then you're like, wait. So first, you not only need to get to the point and get to the chest, but also make sure that nobody else is sneaky enough to get your stuff.
Yeah. Or your teammates take something you want.
Well, I feel like frustration is a part of progress, and it seems like you guys are playing really well on that front. What are the cool things that you like brought from Riot to build this, and what are the things that you're like leaving behind?
There's a couple things that I think specifically that I bring when it comes to developing a new game. Working on League for so long and working on the art assets and skins, there's obviously pipeline things that can change that we could do. I mean, League is a very old game at this point, and when they first designed the game, they didn't have I don't think they were thinking a lot about, well, how do chromos work and how can this be made a lot easier in the process, right? So, with Unreal, we can do some really cool stuff. Like, for instance, there's one thing they have that's like a color curve. It's a lot like a gradient map in Photoshop, but you can do it real time. So if you want to change colors of characters, we color all our characters in black and white, and we use like that recoloring to make color changes quickly. Like click a button, just changing stuff. The shaders are pretty advanced now. And obviously, like, in production of characters themselves, we typically will do it specifically when we're making a Seeker for the first time. What we're going to do is make a proxy version of the character fairly quick. So we'll get that into the game. That'll be in the game for months. And it's okay. And we're okay with people seeing it, which I think is a really awesome thing. Like at Riot, we would typically, like, we don't show anything until it's pretty much final, right? In public beta test realm, that's a whole different thing. But like, once we don't show like work in progress. At Elodie, we're not scared to show work in progress. It's okay to show proxy models in game. We know that the players we have are understanding that this is a game in development. And I think it's just an amazing way to work now. We have that ability to work with players and show them stuff early, let it sit, we can see it in game, see like what it looks like exactly in all the scenarios, and then concept over the top of that model and then bring it to the final. So it's just a more iterative process that we do that makes our the final product a lot better, I think.
Right. I wonder if other people can implement that into their pipe. Like, how much do you think it saves you guys? Like, what are the benefits of it? Are you saving time? Are you saving in costs? Like, how do you define that this approach is better?
I think it's a bit of both with time and cost, because your initial investment in a character is a lot less, so that, you're making a sculpt in a couple of days, you're decimating it, you're giving it to the rigger, they're handing it off the animator. All of us are making rough decisions at that point. So nothing has to be super solidified, so that when we get to the point where we're like, okay, this character's ready, his kit's ready, this looks good, let's now wrap the loop on everything else. Let's come back and finish everything, because you're not actually like making the investment of a whole character all at once. You're taking a little bit of steps, and iteration is super important to us. I mean, in design and art and concept, everything the iteration's just how we work. And I think that's incredibly important.
Is there a lot of people who are, can share input to the things you guys are creating?
Absolutely. Our team is small and we have to be super scrappy. So it's important that when we're doing design meetings for Seekers, that everyone is in there. You can have as little or as much investment as you want in a character. We don't expect everyone to, but you'd be surprised at how many people show up at some of the meetings to like figure out what a Seeker is. And they have ideas, and ideas can come from anywhere. So it's not just artists that have the ideas.
You guys definitely know how to develop a game that is in a fantasy setting. You decided to move away from grim, dark FPS vibes that are like you can see more across the titles in this genre, and created more bright and vibrant gaming world with unique characters, customization, and stuff like that. How did you come up with the style? Like, what was the inspiration? And also, was that scary? Because the market is normally a little bit different for games like that.
Finding the style wasn't super hard, because again, we were working on the RPG in the beginning, and we didn't have to pivot away from the art style. The idea pivoted itself, but the art style remained the same. Since a lot of us came from League and a lot of us have a more lighthearted art background, if you look at most of the people that work on the team, we're definitely more stylized. No one wanted to make a realistic game. So, you can just check those boxes off right away, and you're like, okay, well, what kind of style are we going for? Well, a little more fun, a little more chibi, a little more, and it's definitely matured a little more over time. But in the beginning, it was just more about like fun, like expressive animation, a lot of squash and stretch, a lot of, like the art style itself needed to be bright and colorful. Yeah. And again, like you said, Dark and Darker exists already. Like, you don't want to like follow someone else and be like, okay, let's make Extraction Diablo. I'm sure there'd be people out there that love Extraction Diablo, but that's not for us, and it's not in our heart. We want to make what we know. What we know is like colorful, lighthearted stuff. So it was pretty easy to come up with that.
And you guys have 3 different maps inside the game, right? Mm-hmm. Capped, uncapped, and high stakes. Can you tell me a little bit more the idea, why, all of it?
Sure. It became apparent like right in the beginning when we were playing just the one map and it was uncapped. You would have exactly what we talked about earlier, where players would go in, get all the gear, get out, get all the gear, get out. Then they have a bunch of gear. Now you have newbies coming in as well with the guy that has a full set of purple. Now he's coming in and just wrecking them. So over time, you're like, players aren't having fun. They're exiting the game. They're just getting destroyed right away, right? And a lot of the strategy for the players that were really high end were like, well, let's just go hunt people. Like, they're not even at that point getting gear. They're just like, let's kill stuff along the way and hunt people. So the experience varied. Whereas better loot is on the uncapped map. Capped, you can only have this gear level to go in, right? And then the high stakes is huge reward, but there's a bunch of other players now that it's smaller, so you're going to hit them almost immediately. It's just who has the better gear at that point and who can get the best gear.
Do they use other maps in order to get more gear to get to high stakes map?
Yes. Yeah, you have to use the gear to get – you don't want to go in high stakes if you don't have the gear already.
Oof. I love the intricacies of, and all this little caveats that you guys have. I mean, like, as somebody who played League of Legends for a long time, back, I don't know, 8 years ago, I was like one of the key games that we would play after work was my gang. And it's just a very straightforward gameplay, right? You know exactly what you do, you collaborate with, and it seems like you guys just have all those little and this and this and here. So I wonder what else makes your game special besides what we just went through.
I just think it's a new experience. Especially when you talk about League, like playing League, you know what you're getting every time, right? Yes, the group attacks might be different, and the jungler might come out at a certain time that's different than another one, but this is going to be different every time you play it. Like, you don't know what people are doing. You don't have to follow a specific path, right? In League, if you're laning, you're there. You're going to do that thing. And whoever's best at, killing creatures and has the highest count is going to typically win that in a lane. But you can take different paths. Something is open. You can be like, well, let's go this way. Look at the map. Well, there's a boss here, boss here, boss here. Well, let's go this way. Now this time, let's go this way. And it's not always the same areas of the map that are open. So depending on who's in there, it might be this map. It might be this area. It might be this area. So you're not getting the same experience every single time you play the game.
It sounds like there's the maps themselves, so the level design, and then there's a gameplay, and then you always have a different experience. So, like, what comes first, the level design or the gameplay when you guys are designing it?
Level design is super important. Like any game, when you start up, that all has to be done in gray box, right? You don't art any of that yet. It has to be pretty fleshed out of like how the paths are going to work. And design is ultra important at that point, because you need it to flow correctly. You need the level to flow correctly. You need the right creatures in the right areas. And you don't want to start putting art into anything too soon, because it may change completely. So the design is ridiculously important. And it's hard to say that as an artist, like, don't art stuff, because you shouldn't, at least not for a while. Like, gray box is super important. It's a super important pass. And putting too much art in something too soon will like cloud the perception of, is this fun or isn't it fun? Because people can go, oh, that looks cool. And there's like a perception of fun with something that looks cool that may not necessarily be fun. Because the third, fourth time you play, you're like, okay, that looked cool, but this isn't fun anymore. So there's a really important edge to like not arting things too soon.
It sounds so cool to hear that from the artist. Like, hey, we
it's
don't
definitely
want
hard
to
to
art.
say.
We don't really want to art stuff too much before we get into like making sure the gameplay. I feel like that's the most selfless statement I've heard ever from an artist. So we should definitely quote that. And if anything, the whole industry will. Billy said that we shouldn't be arting things.
I think that definitely comes from Riot's attitude of when they develop games. They don't necessarily hire artists; you hire game developers. And if you think of as a game developer, not as an artist, everything your whole decision making process changes because you're starting to think about like how this works in the game. And if you know the game very well, you stop thinking about, is this the prettiest I can make it? Is this like the hyper detail I can make it? Like the artist of you kind of goes away and goes, what's best for the game? Like what can we do to make the game the best it can be? And as an artist, it is hard to say it's not art. There's a lot of beautiful games out there that have great art that are bad games because they're just not well designed games. And art can be great. If the design isn't there, it's just not fun. So fun is number one. And as an artist, you kind of have to take a backseat to how can I help to make this fun and not change, not alter the fun with the art. So that's really important.
It sounds like, if I can rephrase what you just shared, is how can art make it play more fun? But if there's no fun to begin with, the art can't really save it.
Right. And there's plenty of games out there like that.
Quote. Your guys' characters are very, very, very diverse, very unique, a bunch of different shapes, a bunch of different sizes, colors. Like, I have a lot of questions about, like, how does art direction work? Like, what are the elements that all the characters share that makes it cohesive? Maybe they share nothing. Tell me more how you come up with all of it.
So like we talked about, we'll have a design meeting where we'll go over, this is the intent. It might be as simple as this character is, in this case, if we're looking at Kumu, he's a bruiser character, right? He's more, actually I should say more of a tank, not a bruiser. He needs to protect his party. That's as simple as the briefs are sometimes. It's just like, here's a tank. What do you want to do? Like, and we'll get together and be like, well, this is a cool thematic. This is a cool thematic. And one thing that keeps it all really cohesive is that Natalie Pellman, our concept artist, pretty much does every single Seeker. So it just naturally, because there's one art style coming from her and her designs, that it's going to be somewhat cohesive. And she knows what she's done before. And she's like, well, let's not repeat that. Let's do another thing. Or in this case, this thematic is going to get repeated. Whereas if you're looking at Kumu, he's one of our older assets that one of the first characters we put in game, very different from the first version that he was ever in the game. And I love what happened with him. He's just like, he went from this big kind of blocky square character to this taller, more like King of the Forest character. So it's not just like one iteration and we're done. Like we talked about, there's many iterations of a character. So we may decide at one point, like, this character doesn't really fit anymore. And we've done that with characters and just, we need to redesign this because it did fall out of the cast. So we need to bring it back into the artwork that looks the same. So we need to make sure that at that level, it's exactly what we need it to be. So characters go through all kinds of iterations.
My favorite, or one of my favorite, is Lily. She's super cool. She's very cute, very stylish, with beautiful outfit, hair, and accessories. Why did you even approve her? I guess you'd have multiple iterations. What made her special?
It's really cool because she was one of the first characters as well. It was Kumu and it was Lily, lovingly called Ice Mage, which is the description we got, right? She's an ice mage. Well, what do we want her to look like? And on Vadim's art station, you can actually see a lot of the iterations where she started out in the initial concepts, which is the robed version that we decided wasn't quite modern enough. It was too old fantasy. So she ended up evolving from this into this. And then we're like, okay, that's a little newer feeling, a little more modern, but we still want a little more. to where we got into what if we gave her a little bit more modern shoes, not necessarily the big fur boots, and we came up with this design.
Love it. Who's your favorite?
My favorite character, I can't talk about.
Why? Because it's not in the game yet?
It's not in the game yet.
Okay, well, what's your second favorite?
Second favorite? I like Kumu a lot because I like tanking. Neri is actually one of my favorites as well because I always try to play a support character, whether I'm playing a world like a MMO or a game like League. I think my favorite character in League is Sona. So I'm always trying to support the team. So typically healers, typically tanks. I'm not super big on DPS because I feel like they get killed too easily.
Did you guys do any marketing research of how to make your characters, or is it just purely fantasy? I mean, characters and skins is what makes the most money in the games like that, right? So you have to have that as a biggest driver of the economy and the survival of the team.
I wouldn't say the Seeker designs themselves are initially driven by what will make money or what won't. I think it's more about what's the passion of the team right now. I think you will see that more obviously from my experience on League and the skins team. You typically know what will sell as far as the skins. So I definitely think that some of that knowledge will certainly carry over into, what we make for the skins themselves. But no, not the Seekers themselves. We're pretty much keeping that pretty close to the chest. The more we work with the community, the more feedback we get. We're obviously going to take that information and put it into the game itself. Try to use as much as we can. That in that way, we don't want to make any of the players feel like we're not listening to them, because we definitely are. That we definitely apply feedback as often as possible.
Okay, but how would you know what sells, right? It's a pretty big responsibility, and if everybody just comes and runs with the way they see the character, that you might not, have a viable business model. How do you, especially at an art director or art lead level, make sure that you create stuff that is essential for the studio moving forward? Yeah,
there's definitely data out there that we can look at as far as what will sell and what does sell. I'm hesitant to say we will definitely apply the stuff we understand and we know. A lot of us have experience on League for that, but working in League in the beginning, there was a specific mandate where they were saying, well, everything has to be fantasy. And so a lot of the first skins were fantasy skins. And then that was kind of lifted. And then when we started making any kind of skins, now you're introducing robots like Mecha Malphite, or even the project skins are obviously very, very futuristic. People want alternate fantasies for sure. And we definitely want to provide that as well.
Game is an isometric view, and so everything is very small. You obviously watch from the above, but the characters are very readable. How do you achieve that?
That's definitely a balancing act, because you can't have the details be too micro that they buzz at small details, but you also have to see them in the lobby, which is a fairly close camera view. So you're almost creating a third-person character. So we have to really look at both and pay attention to both. We've definitely made changes once we've seen the characters go from lobby to in-game, where we've had to reduce contrast on details and just change some details wholly. When we were working on Strix, he's an owl character, and the original design had kind of the folded wing, and it kind of looked a little clumpy from the camera angle, the isometric camera angle. While it looked fine from the lobby view, it was one of the things where we had it for months, and we're looking at it, we're like, okay, let's take that wing, the side wing, and let's actually detail all the feathers out and change the design to look better from that view. And it ended up looking better from both views. So it was a good thing. But we specifically will look at both constantly, and you can zoom in the game so you can get closer to the character. Things you didn't have to necessarily pay attention to in League. But obviously, if you look at Wild Rift, they're paying attention to that now, because you can see the characters up close and in game, very different views. So, but the trick is to not make two models, because you don't want to make a model for the in game and then a different model for the game view. If you had time and unlimited money, that's probably the way you want to do it. But we are small.
You have to be scrappy. I love it. Speaking of different versions, right? On one hand, when you're designing the original character, you need to make it cool. So, players fall in love with it. But then you also need to leave room for awesomeness for skins so people would buy it. So what's the balance? How to make them cool-ish enough to fall in love, but not extremely awesome that there's nothing else to add? Like, how does that work?
And so for skins for us are a little bit different, since we developed a system that I always wanted on League, where we actually separated the head, the body, and the weapon into separate elements. So players can actually have a lot more personal choice in what they want to dress up like. So you can have a certain weapon if you like this weapon with this outfit, with this head, with this. And we can do pretty cool event stuff with the events where maybe we just release a certain headgear type or a different weapon or exclusive giveaway kind of things. Or it's just, it doesn't require us to make whole body costumes, so we can make a lot of different stuff in general. As far as skin thematics, I think we're looking more towards, at least the early ones, they're going to be more story driven skins rather than like maybe pie in the sky, like K-pop. Well, I mean, we sure want to do those at some point. Like we know what's popular, given that a lot of us worked on League and we know what skins are pretty popular. I think it's important for us not to be derivative of other games as well. So we don't want to do the exact same things over and over again that have been done. So a lot of our early stuff is going to be a lot more story based.
So a lot of creativity flow, and it's endless, and you don't limit it. Is that correct assessment of your pipeline?
More or less. I mean, there's always a limit to what we can get done in the day, and that's really the determining factor of like what can we do. I mean, sure, there's ideas that are like, well, what if we did this like cool machine arm that opened up and all that? And we're like, yeah, that's probably going to take too long now. Maybe in the future. It's a great idea.
How do you define a day? Is it 8 hours or 18 hours?
I think work-life balance is super important. I hope most people, I work 8 hours. Most people work 8 hours. And there's those days where, especially as you're working from home, you're going to just work a 13-hour day. You're going to work a 15-hour day. And no one's telling you to do it. You're just like, I'm really into this right now. Because art is one of those things, you either have a groove or you don't. And when you're in that groove, you want to stay in that groove. And some days you have it and some days you don't. So you need to really make sure you're utilizing it when you have it.
I feel like the game itself has a pretty low skill floor to get in. Is that affecting the art, or was that thought process affecting the art of like how to make it more accessible to attract more players, or they're the two parallel streams?
We never made the art to be like, well, what's the most accessible, right? Because I don't think that's a great approach to be like, people will like the game, people will not like the game. Art will definitely bring them in. That's what it does. The design keeps them there, right? Art brings you in, design keeps you there. But it was never like, well, this is the art that will appeal to the most people, because quite honestly, extraction games aren't for everybody as it is. And we're not making a game for everyone. Obviously, you want to tell your investors, you're like, oh, we're going to make this game for everyone. Well, not everyone's going to play every game. So there's no specific thought process to make it more accessible when it comes to art, to match the game. If accessibility is like seeing your character, like having him separate from the background, stuff like that, yeah, we're definitely considering like what clarity issues, right? Like, are there VFX all over the screen? We don't want that, right? We want for you to be able to see your character identified. Who are your friends? Who are the people you're fighting? And we still have a long way to go on that. Like we battle that every time we're doing an update. We're just like, is this a clarity issue? Like if it's specifically those kinds of art decisions, yeah, we absolutely, does this work for colorblind? Does this not? Like, how does that work? Like, there's a lot of art design decisions that go together hand in hand with like just being able to play the game without art for getting in the way.
You guys did a bunch of playtests, and you're having a closed beta. Was there anything in the playtest or from the first, players' experience and feedback that affected the art and the choices that you guys made that you have to redo now?
Definitely some lighting stuff that we were doing, but as far as like individual like assets, not really. We get more feedback than anything about it's too hard to extract, or it's too easy to extract, or I can't play solo. And then you'll watch other people solo the entire game and kill 3 people at once. So it's like, what feedback do you take at that point?
So nobody's complaining on art.
Not so much. We're doing pretty well there.
Yeah, you're like, no feedback on art.
There's always feedback on, I like this character. Sometimes we'll update the character from proxy to a final model, and they're like, well, I really liked how this was before. Like June's face was one of the comments we got, like, oh, and I think it was just like there was a skinning error and like his eye was down. It was just the little things, but it's great. People pointed out, they're like, he just looks sad now. I'm like, oh, because there's no facial. We updated it and there was no facial animation. I'm like, well, he doesn't look like anything.
Yumi, we're talking about that you guys have a little bit of a different pipeline when it comes to 3D character creation, right? Can you share a little bit more what makes it unique and, why that approach works?
It's a little more iterative than the games I've worked on in the past, to where, we'll specifically make proxy models very quickly. We'll get them in the game. They'll soak for a long time. We also make our characters in black and white to make sure they read correctly. And then also we'll color them with our shaders. We have this huge library of what are called color curves in the color atlas, where the regions of the characters can be broken up into different shaders. They can also be broken up into different coloring. So it takes the coloring of the character, it takes the grayscale value and remaps it. So you can do pretty much anything with it and just open the library, pick, find the right color combinations. It makes making, like, if you're making skin thematic, you can literally do a whole character skin thematic and make sure they're all consistent, because you're not using individual like texture maps. You don't have to adjust a texture map, adjust texture map. You're just adjusting color curves. And at that point, you're just adjusting grayscale inside substance to make sure it looks correct. So it's a very different, fun process that it was a lot of work to come up with in the beginning to make sure it's consistent, but we have a pretty nice substance pipeline now. Substance painter pipeline that works pretty well for that. And then we can get assets in really quickly.
I think we're good on this part. Do you feel like there was any questions or things that would be useful to elaborate on?
It's just when we were talking about building with the community, and like back in the day when you worked on a PlayStation game, you would have a gold master. Like you'd have to have everything perfect, absolutely perfect, no bugs, because you couldn't count on anyone updating the game after that. I mean, they could patch it, and the internet was pretty young then, but you literally, like, you had a gold master end date. This is when the game is done. But when you're working with the community itself, like, you get to do cool things. Like if you look at Intrepid Games, like watching them build Ashes of Creation with the community all the time, updating, like that's just so useful that you just couldn't do before.
Is that your guys' approach for Elodie in general?
Well, absolutely. Like the more we can incorporate the community, and when we go to open beta, we're just going to get this wall of feedback that we're going to have to incorporate. And when it's just all very useful. It's just amazing to be able to like work with the community while you're making a game. I think that's just how development's turning. It's like watching Star Citizen. Like that game is not a game yet, but they're building it with the community. So it's amazing to see games like that.
There's a lot of news on the internet about that one, having some troubles. My favorite story was at an event a couple months ago, and I think it was Alex, who was a founder of Bungie, sharing a story of early days of Bungie when they were, I don't remember what the game was, but it was pretty much like a game that you get on the CD or even like whatever cartridge, whatever versions of stuff that they had back then. And they had a publishing deal and they shipped a game, and it was about to be like, it was, all the discs, everything was created, and they were trying to hit the dates for like Thanksgiving or Christmas. So it's just like the major window of opportunity, like if you're not on the shelves for that time, you're you're just not going to be bought, like, because that's all the gifts and whatever. And so a day before, like, they put all the games into a truck to, like, you know, bring to all the Walmarts and Targets and everything of the world, their publisher reported a bug. Remember back in the days you had to, like, you have the disc C and disc B, you know, like, and C was like all the like software, whatever. And then B was like all the other stuff. And so if the game was installed on the C, it would automatically erase the entire computer, like everything.
Wow.
Like everything.
So they had to stop everything.
Everything. And they were in front of this gigantic, like, dilemma of, like, we just hope that only maybe 1% of people face this idea and face this problem, and some of them going to lose their wedding photos and their dissertation, or like doctors or whatever, and 99% would be, you know, happy like a clam, and we get to, you know, keep the studio, because if we don't ship it, we're not going to get, you know, we might not survive till, I mean, all we know, like, we all know that Bungie survived and actually decided not to ship the game and recall and fix the bug and, like, reprint it, but they absolutely lost a massive opportunity for the game. But I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a bug.
Yeah, it was definitely a different time when you had to be like, oh, wait, what game is launching right now? Oh, okay, we'll sit on the Gold Master for a little bit and we'll launch after this because that game's going to be really big. I mean, you still see that happening when people launch games. Yeah.
We still absolutely have that. Well, anyhow, Billy, it was such a pleasure having you. I am keeping my fingers crossed for the Seekers of Skyveil to be the most awesome, fun, crazy game of next year and years moving forward. We need some competition in the MOBA space and maybe in the extraction space. I mean, you know what? We can have competition everywhere as long as there's good content. So I wish you guys luck on your journey, and hope we can do it again, but talk about, like, how you conquered the world with this awesome game maybe in a year from now.
That would be great.
To shoot that. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ninel.